Imagine having a parasite living in your gut. Imagine that it got there by eating undercooked meat, or by drinking contaminated water, or from gardening, or from your tropical holiday, or even as a result of one of your pets. Parasites sound a little bit yucky, and it's something that's not often talked about. And it sounds like it might be something that's quite uncommon, except it's not. Health Explorer Neil Fellows here from Total Wellness Club to get healthy and fit and stay healthy and fit and do it in a way that's natural and unique to you. Please subscribe and hit the bell to get notified of all of our latest uploads. Today we're going to be talking to award-winning nutritionist Trish Tucker May about parasite cleansing. Trish, tell us what the stats are. How many people are likely suffering from parasites and need a parasite cleanse, but maybe don't know that that's what they need?
Yeah, okay, hopefully you're sitting down. Some experts believe that around 85% of the population have at least one parasite living in their body, and inaccurate testing means that they often go either undetected or unreported. You know, approximately 1.5 billion people are infected with soil transmitted helminths, which are like, you know, pinworms, tapeworms, fluke worms, that sort of thing. And that's a stat put out by the World Health Organization in 2020. So 1.5 billion. You know, Ascaris, it's a very common helminth, human infection up to 1.2 billion, and actually around 60,000 deaths annually. So, you know, 85% of us are, you know, a lot of the cases of infection may not result in physical symptoms that get diagnosed. 50,000 Brits a year are infected by Giardia. And that's a little bit old, that one. That's Food Standards Agency back in 2011. But, you know, even in 2015, we had 300,000 homes in Preston affected by a parasite in the water supply.
Wow.
Yeah.
I would never have, and I've asked the question, but I had no idea the answer I was going to get back from you.
Yeah.
What would be some of the symptoms that people might be suffering? And how do we know it's true? I mean, because if you go to the GP isn't really saying to you, you have a parasite.
Yeah, indeed. Look, some of the symptoms, and this is the difficulty because often it goes undiagnosed or it can be put down to something else. So some of these symptoms you could think, well, this could be anything. But when you look at the number of symptoms happening together, so, you know, and I always say to my clients, you know, the body whispers a long time before it starts to shout. So some of these are more whispers, and then I'll go through into some broader symptoms. But classic symptoms are dark circles under the eyes, red spots on the tongue, or the heat, the tongue showing heat or itchiness or irritation, pale face or anemia or low iron, itchy skin, jaw pain, a pillow that is stained yellow, teeth grinding, tension headaches, feeling agitated and anxious, and feeling unclean, and feeling, especially in children, right? If your child ever is very, very teary, but doesn't know what's wrong with them. They're like, if they say something like, I just don't know what's wrong with me, sort of deflection of, it's not me. I don't know what's wrong with me. Something's overcoming me. And also particularly again in children, if they are craving, like if they have this insatiable appetite, particularly for sugar and particularly around the full moon, and they feel like it's not them that's craving it. It's like, I don't know what's wrong with me, sort of language, that can be a sign of an infestation. Certainly craving salt or sugar around the full moon. Rectal itching, of course, is a classic symptom. And you know, when if and when you inspect your stool, which I do encourage everybody to do, if you do see pinworms in your stool, then you do, of course, have a big infestation. But sometimes flu-like symptoms, swollen lymph nodes, muscle aches and pains that last over a month. But also some are broader symptoms like asthma, unexplained teariness, irritability, headaches, intestinal cramps, bloating, gas. If you have pets in your home, if you have cats, dogs, rabbits and birds, then more than likely you have at least one parasite. If you are prone, or your children particularly are prone to sleepwalking or night terrors or being found on their hands and knees in their bed, rocking, that could be a sign of parasites. Toenail infections, fungus, and athlete's foot. Sensitivity to strong smells and certain sensitivities to foods. Psoriasis, eczema, allergies, unexplained skin allergies, and rashes are all potential symptoms. Now you think that, well, that's a massive list of symptoms. Yeah. But if going through that list of symptoms, you think you have had between 1 and 5 of those symptoms in conjunction with each other, then there is potentially a mild parasite infection. Certainly if you are having poorly formed stools, rectal itching, constant belting, severe fatigue, mucus in your stools, and you have 6 to 13 of those types of symptoms, then very likely that you have a moderate parasite infection or infestation. And certainly if you've been traveling abroad, if you've experienced diarrhea, vomiting, bug traveling abroad, if you've eaten or you eat regularly smoked fish, raw fish and sushi, if you've lived overseas, if you've lived in a tropical region, if you've been exposed to unfiltered water or untreated water when traveling overseas and you've ended up sick, then that's really the embedding down of parasites, where they, you know, you've been exposed, your body is trying to throw it off by vomiting and diarrhea, but in the meantime, those parasites are bedding down into tissues, creating a biofilm around them, and then they, you know, they stay there and they cause all sorts of neurotoxins to be released, which causes then persistent joint pain. If you're a restless sleeper, if you have exposure to animals, pigs, horses, dogs, you're living on a farm, you're handling manure, you're not washing your hands properly, all of those things would, you know, definitely lead to parasite infections.
Wow, it's quite a list there. I was going to ask you, I think you answered the question. I was going to ask you, how do we get them? But obviously, you know, you mentioned pets, you've mentioned water, you've mentioned fish, you've mentioned traveling abroad. Is there anything that I've missed?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And, you know, we're more bacteria than anything else. So we're being exposed to these things all the time. I mean, if you have been into a public swimming pool, if you have children in play centres, childcare centres, if you do any sort of gardening, you spend any time barefoot on the grass, you have pets, you know, you've been in hot tubs in the public arena, all this sort of thing, even public toilet seats, you know, they do reside on these areas. And now, of course, in the food chain, we have Lyme's disease in the food chain. We have food being transported and stored all around the world with possible exposure to cockroaches and rodents. We have fruit and veg coming in from all over the world into the UK every day, and that has potential parasite residue, spores and flukes on it. So, you know, we are being exposed to this sort of thing often.
Wow. So today we're talking to Trish Tucker May about Parasite Cleanse. If you're finding this information really useful and helpful, please do give us a thumbs up, because it really does help the channel. Trish, if someone's recognizing from that really long list that you gave us a moment ago about the possibilities that they could have a parasite, what would be 1 to 3 things that they could start to do to address this as an issue? Okay.
Certainly start to map your symptoms. So start to create a list of your symptoms. And I work with all my clients. I say, look, you know, let's get all these body whispers, all these little niggles that seem so minor. When you get a long list of them and you realize that there's maybe 6 to 13 or more symptoms, then you start to see a little bit of a pattern. And, you know, parasites can live up in our body for 30 to 40 years. We can be born in with them. So, you know, first thing is create a list of the symptoms. And then we start to create maybe a score for the severity of the symptoms and map those symptoms alongside the moon cycle. Because what happens when, you know, during the full moon, we have this a change in serotonin and melatonin levels that the body produces, and parasites have a serotonin receptor in them. So they become much more physically active over the course of the full moon. And therefore we may see more symptoms over the full moon. You know, it's interesting that the word lunatic comes from the lunar cycle and parasites in the brain causing craziness, you know. So someone's acting like a lunatic, they're prone to craziness, and that's where that word comes from. So certainly, firstly make a list of the symptoms, and then track the severity of those symptoms over the full moon. Now, certainly changing the diet to make sure that you have a first line of defense against parasites is really important, that we have good bile flow. Now, the liver and the gallbladder produce bile, and the bile needs to be flowing readily out of the liver, out of a good, resilient, healthy liver, in order as that first line of defense against parasites. So we want to make sure that the bile flow is good and the liver is not sluggish. So things that, of course, affect the liver: processed foods, sugars. Sugar is a big one, feeds parasites. So really reducing the amount of particularly refined sugars. Even too much fruit sugar can feed parasites. And doing the liver work, so doing a liver cleanse, spending some time reducing the amount of toxins going in, whether it be through stimulants, tea and coffee, alcohol, refined sugars, processed foods, and gluten and dairy. Of course, all of those things will put the liver under strain. So giving the liver a bit of a break to make sure that first line of defense of bile pathways are nice and clear is that first line of defense against parasites. And then if you find that you think that you've got, this moderate parasite infection or infestation, then track those symptoms against the moon, and then certainly get yourself tested. And that can be either through kinesiology. Kinesiology is fantastically accurate for detecting parasites, flukes, spores, worms in the gut or in other tissues. And also a comprehensive stool analysis will also generally pick up some parasites.
Yeah.
But it always starts with mapping out those symptoms first to check with the severity of those symptoms.
You mentioned liver cleanse there, and we recently recorded a video with you on liver cleanse. So what I'll do is I'll add a link to that so that people can see that video as well, so they've got the way of going about doing that. Trish, one question just occurred to me as you were talking there, is what happens if somebody doesn't treat a parasite? What would happen?
Okay, I'm a really good example of that. So my way into nutrition after being really sick for 32 years was undiagnosed parasites. And, what ended up happening after being born in with respiratory complaints, asthma, bronchitis, as a young adult, developing shingles, Ross River fever. And at the age of 32, when I peaked at 12 anaphylactic episodes in 1 year, which required a ride in an ambulance or a rush to a hospital to get some adrenaline, or a 3-day stay in a hospital when I touched a tree in Greece, I was becoming so reactive to nasturtiums, blue cheese, which, if prone to mold, anyone who's prone to mold would react to anyway. But I ate a burger in Malmesbury, I had an anaphylaxis. I had potato salad in the Isle of Wight, I had anaphylaxis. I had, I was so reactive.
Yeah.
Picture of toxicity. So I was very, very close to the edge of life-threatening anaphylaxis. So that's what can happen when you ignore the fact that, and when I was diagnosed, I was diagnosed with a hookworm, high candida. I would never have put my respiratory and my asthma complaints down to a gut issue. I would never put those two and two together until I saw a nutritionist, which saved my life. So, that's what can happen when they're left untreated. And certainly when you leave toxoplasma, which is related to cats and cat feces, you leave that untreated, that goes to the brain, and, you have the case of, serious mental health issues because you have this level of toxicity that's reached the brain.
Wow. Anyone who's got pets clearly should consider doing a parasite cleanse. Based on what we've talked about today, what would be something that people can take away and do immediately that's practical?
Yeah. Okay. So once again, like map your symptoms, get a list of your symptoms and start to track them according to the next full moon. So this next full moon coming up at the end of the month, if your symptoms are getting worse over that, what you can do, actually, you can put some tape over the anus and make sure, you know, over the full moon period. Because what happens with pinworms particularly is they will travel out of the rectum and lay eggs in your sheets and then travel back in over the course of the full moon. They're pretty disgusting little creatures, really.
And what type of tape are we talking about here, Trish? Are we talking?
Yeah, just a small bit of masking tape or something that would stay in place, you know, that would stop that, or then you would be able to see. And also with kids, I mean, it's been common with our kids, you know, Mum, I've got an itchy bum, right? Bend over, get a torch, have a look. At night time, can you see any worms? You know, check your stool. If you can see some worms, then you do have an infestation. So firstly, check your symptoms, get a list of your symptoms and see if they're worse over the full moon. Okay, because being very aware of the lunar cycle very much helps with your hormone balancing, your metabolism, your cortisol levels, your serotonin, your dopamine anyway. So that's a good thing to be connected to and aware of. And then, you know, if you do find you have an infestation, you know, seek out a kinesiologist who specializes in this, or someone like myself who does stool samples and hair testing, so we can ascertain the extent of what we're dealing with. And then we can do the work on supporting the elimination channels. So we support the bowel, of course, first, and the kidneys and the liver and the lymphatics and the skin and the lungs. And we do that before any sort of program of deparasitation. We would embark on a liver support program first to make sure the bowel and the liver and the kidneys are all working well, ready for the killing off stage.
The question really, just thinking, if somebody has pets, should this be something that they should be considering doing on a regular basis for themselves?
Yes. Absolutely. And look, our grandmothers would say, you know, if a kid is acting up, a child is acting up and is being very teary and very irrational and a bit prone to big tantrums, your grandmother would say, he's got worms or she's got worms. Or if they've got an insatiable appetite and they've got hollow legs, you know, it's an old-fashioned saying, you know, you worm your pets, you need to worm the entire family. And so you think about this maybe twice a year, end of summer when you've been playing outside, playing on the lawn, digging your garden, all that sort of thing. End of summer, end of winter, twice a year, do a worming treatment. And that can be natural. It can be, you know, I use a lot of wormwood, clove, walnut, black walnut tincture, that sort of thing. But also, you know, Ovex, over-the-counter worming, Combantrum, that sort of thing also is efficient. I like to go the natural route, but sometimes it's very efficient just to go, okay, Ovex, over the counter, let's do a general worming, you know, at the end of the summer. Very good idea.
Fantastic. Trish, really do appreciate your time talking to us today about parasite cleansing. So thank you so much for your time. Some of those stats that Trish gave at the beginning of that interview were just mind-blowing for me. 85% of people may be living with parasites that are untreated, and clearly it may be affecting people who have pets more than other people. We mentioned during the interview that I'd leave a link for the liver cleanse, so I'll leave that underneath this video. I'll also leave a link to Trish's profile on Total Wellness Club, where you'll be able to see all of her reviews from her clients. And will you be taking Trish's challenge? Challenges can be life-changing. You give something a go, sometimes it can work, sometimes it doesn't, but what it can lead you to is finding something that does. I'll be trying Trish's challenge. You can see my findings from this challenge in our challenge roundup video, which is a monthly summary covering all of the challenges our experts have shared. To get that video and all of our latest health and wellness uploads, including interviews and reviews, subscribe and hit the bell so you get notified whenever we post. And if this channel can help your friends and family, please share it with them too. If you want to get proactive with your health, Total Wellness Club are developing health quests over at questly.life. Join while we're developing the site and get access to health quests that immediately personalise your health. You'll get to identify which of 10 critical health categories need your attention. You'll be able to track your progress, and you'll be able to help us develop the platform too. I'll put a link in the description, and I'll see you in the next video.